Good day, University City, and welcome to UC Talks, a hyper-local podcast that features conversations, interviews, and news of importance for University City. My name is Jemma Samala, and I'm the editor of the University City Community Association's newsletter. This podcast is brought to you by the University City Community Association and made possible through a grant from the County of San Diego. For more information about UCCA, go to our website at universitycitynews.org. And today I am honored to be talking to Liana Alston, who grew up here in University City. She attended UC Riverside and has been working as a paralegal for about the past 10 years. And Liana recently returned to stay with her parents during this pandemic that we're in and will soon be attending law school. Congratulations. And after the George Floyd incident, Liana wrote a post on NextDoor entitled "From Non-Racist to Anti-Racist in 2020, Some Tools." And there was lots of interest in that original post. And so Liana decided to start a NextDoor group to keep the conversation going. And the group is called UC Residents Against Racism, exclamation point.
Yeah. Yes.
And first off, welcome to UC Talks, Liana. And why did you feel the need to make that original post?
Well, given the times and books that I've read, a book that I'm reading in particular, and just seeing the things that go back and forth on social media, on Facebook, among people I know, and then especially on NextDoor, I thought it would be, helpful to make a post like that, because if you aren't Black yourself or not a person of color, it's hard to walk in the other person's shoes, and it's hard to know when you're saying things that are not okay. Sometimes it might be. So I think it's important for people to be aware that there still are problems. Just because we have a beautiful community and your kids are doing well, it doesn't mean that there aren't systemic issues that need to be taken care of. So it's important, I think, in this day and age to be anti-racist as opposed to just not racist or colorblind. You have to, really work to make sure that your environments, work, school, et cetera, are equitable.
Mm-hmm. And when you were growing up in UC, did you find that there was racism towards you or your family, or I know, as far as what I've experienced, it's very subtle.
Yes,
so,
very subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's no overt, there's no crosses burning in our lawn or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, going to school, there were a lot of subtle things. And the funny thing is that growing up here, I had very educated parents, but I think in some ways they try to protect you, so it's not like I was 10 years old spotting racism here and there. Things would happen and I might perceive it as just mean or, So the things I do remember, I guess I remember a lot of the time friends, and this is a little innocuous, but it's subtle, friends saying, "Oh, you're not Black, you're the whitest Black girl I know," and stuff like that. And that stuff like that is a matter of exposure, just because I speak a certain way, or just because we're similarly assimilated does not mean that I'm not Black. It doesn't mean I'm not, my ethnic group and from that community. So, and then, incidents with teachers, one teacher, I remember speaking in front of class once and I said something like, my family is upper middle class. And the teacher interjected and interrupted me and said, "No, you're middle class, middle class at best."
Okay.
Yeah. The other teachers just kind of shutting me down or, harshly. You're not supposed to talk in class, but I remember being kind of disproportionately, people would come down a little harder on me, teachers and stuff like that. There's a bunch of other things. They're kind of boring, but.
But it's interesting that you kind of bring up the subtleness, with friends, "Oh, I don't see you as Black," or whatever, because when you think about, I've experienced that too. We'll be talking about stuff and I'll say, "Well, I'm of color," and they're like, "Oh no, I don't think of you that way," and it's well, yeah.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. And it gives you, it's a beautiful thing, And it gives you a different perspective and a different, as you move through life and you see things that other people don't. And I think that should be welcomed. Diversity is good.
Yeah. And one thing that you, I think you said it in your original post about your brother, who very well educated, I'm sure, who went to Stanford and everything. And I guess had been pulled over 3 times by the police and why the San Diego police. And why was that? Do you think it was just because he was Black in the wrong neighborhood or something, or?
Absolutely. For actually 2 times it was pulled over. And one time he was in, I think it's called Marcy Park on the west end of DC.
Yeah.
And there was a birthday party at a house, and it was the evening. And he and one of the boys walked to the park, to Marcy Park. And a police car saw them, drove up onto the curb, onto the sidewalk, like across the grass at them. And that is a tactic they used to use, I don't know, some use, to get people running so that then they have probable cause to detain you or whatever. So that was absolutely uncalled for. He was an adolescent, just out in the park, So that's not even a pullover situation. And then I think 2 other times it was a cop that pulled him over. Once it was for a taillight and, just gave him a lot of attitude, kind of like, I don't, what are you guys up to? One of them said one. So yeah, not cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so you grew up here, you went to Doyle, you went to Stanley Middle, and you went to UC High. And I know Doyle in particular is very colorful, should I say. So there's lots of groups from all over the world there. And I don't know if you could hear my dog barking, but she'll be over it soon. So how were your experiences there with very diverse, cultural, backgrounds of people to, let's say, when you got to like Stanley or UC High, or was it about the same?
Yeah, no, different. I mean, different, obviously, because I was a lot younger. So it's, just way different. But in terms of culture, I did well at Stanley. I think we both did really well. It's in terms of like the professors loved, our teachers loved us and stuff like that, and our family. And it was very diverse. I think there was like a multicultural parade or something, like a world.
They do.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful thing. Yeah, a lot of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
So that way, I think it was probably helpful because I didn't stick out like a sore thumb necessarily. But at the same time, there were still very few African American students.
Yeah.
I know my brother in particular had I think one teacher was just like I hinted at earlier, like just unfairly harsh with him. That particular teacher was nice with me. I think I loved her. I do remember like, just feeling out of place, wanting to be white. I think my mom told me once that I came home and asked her, when is my face going to turn white or something like that.
Really.
Yeah, so it's a subtle kind of insidious thing, but Doyle was a great school. And then Stanley, it's middle school, so all sorts of things are going on. But,
right.
but it was markedly less like diverse in terms of international students and just other races other than white and Black. I particularly, because I'm from UC, I had a lot of white friends.
Right.
But there were still crazy moments. Like I remember once a teacher, yelling at me to get on the bus in time for the bus to leave. And I was on my way to practice, in the back of Stanley.
It's funny you say that because I do remember one of the subtle incidents towards me was when I was volunteering, as a parent at Spreckles. Someone had said to me, "Oh, did you choice in?" Like I was like, automatically they thought, "Oh, I didn't live in the neighborhood, that I must have like choiced in, my kids or something." So it's like those subtle things, and I was thinking about this earlier too. Is we kind of, that racism, kind of hurts our self-esteem a little bit, like how you're saying
Yes.
that, maybe when am I going to turn white? I remember distinctly, like in my youth, like teens and early college, when you're starting a date and everything, I remember thinking, oh, that guy's not going to like me because I'm not a blonde white chick,
Yeah.
and we kind of do that to ourselves,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
so
And it's a lot. It's the message we're getting too. So
yeah, and you see that in, I guess, in commercials for things, you get the tall, tall, slim, blonde, white women, having all this great fun and everything. So, that's what we look at. But, hopefully things are changing, and I mean, you're working at that too. And
Yeah.
so, which is great. And I'm glad you started that the NextDoor group. And so, what's the kind of responses you've been getting since you've started that group?
I mean, overwhelmingly positive in terms of directly to me responses. I was very surprised to get so many, responses to that original post. And not only was Nextdoor prompts you to make a group automatically.
Oh,
yeah, but I didn't do it initially because I just have a lot going on, and there is a sort of, I don't know, an ethos, a rule or something, that it's not really on oppressed people or Black people to educate other people about, what our plight is in America. It's sort of, there's so much education on it out there. So it's, it's a lot to kind of take the time to run a group. So I didn't do it initially. But someone from NextDoor actually reached out to me and said, this is a really good topic and you got a lot of response, and they're, I think proactive in terms of diversity and making good on the Black Lives Matter kind of issues. So I made the group and it's been really good. I'm glad I did. Because even though, I don't really have time to do it. So I'm thinking of reaching out to this group called Showing Up for Racial Justice. They have a thriving chapter in San Diego. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure one of them might be able to take it over for a while, as I prep for law school and
right.
like that.
And that is one of the groups I was going to bring up. It's, the acronym is SURJ, so which stands for, I thought I wrote it down, but what does it stand for again?
Showing Up for Racial Justice.
Showing Up for Racial Justice, yes. And so, and basically it was kind of started, it's been around for over 10 years, I realized. It's not new. And shows you how long this has been going on, and it's basically to help, I guess, whites become anti-racist, with education and events and things like that,
Yeah.
And how do you think that works? I mean, it's funny because I was thinking of it before. I would think, well, why do we use whites and Blacks and browns? Why do we use that as referring to people? I used to teach my kid to say African American, Latino, Caucasian. Is that? Do you think that those colors is okay?
Well,
I'm weird about it,
Yeah, it is weird. I mean, but it is important to kind of educate people about all of the above, because that is because those racial categories, even though they're kind of broad and they were human constructs, they are a way to see inequity in our society, so if you just do away with it, oh, well, I don't use the term white, or I don't use the term Black, or if you can't at least identify that for the purpose of analyzing, okay, what's going on here? If we stop identifying that these people are considered white in society, then all of a sudden, how do you, I don't know, all of a sudden my class isn't predominantly white anymore, and I can't place what's going on with, bad things happen racial. So it's kind of important to just educate your kid about all the above. Personally, I don't really care either way, African American or Black. But I've heard that Black is the most commonly preferred because it's just, a lot of us don't know where we came from exactly. I mean, obviously it's Africa somewhere down the line, but we're so far removed. There is just this distinctly African-American, culture that encompasses a lot of people from different continents now, or different countries now. So Black is the agreed upon term, I think. I like it capitalized, and you say Black person, don't refer to us as just the Blacks, like 45 does.
Yeah.
Those are all things that like Surge,
Mm-hmm.
groups like Surge specialize in, and they'll help you kind of flesh that out. And once you get to a certain point, it doesn't really matter, the small, you don't have to sweat the small stuff, because you have a greater understanding that informs your output.
Mm-hmm. And for people that want to know, their website is showingupforracialjustice.org. And so if anybody wants to look more into that group, Surge, go to their website, showingupforracialjustice.org. Now, going back to, the term Black. So how do you feel about, how people are saying, okay, there's, Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And then people say, well, all lives matter. Why is it important to use the Black Lives Matter? Explain that to, some people that don't understand why it's, if you say all lives matter, it takes away.
Yeah. It's reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course all lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
Black lives matter because all lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, this movement and civil rights, and the history of civil rights in this country, and the insidious history of how this country kind of subjugated and just, beat back people down at every turn, not that long ago. And civil rights happened, but then it took a while for them to implement a lot of things. My dad was still born in a segregated hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like these things are that long ago. It's not like people still don't have parents and grandparents that were involved in these things one way or another, that are informing their lives. So it's important that we're acknowledging and finding out where racism and subtle racism and systemic racism, more importantly, and institutional racism still exists in our society, and fleshing that out and dealing with it so that we can level the playing field. Right. So that we don't have other issues. A lot of people have issues with the result, of crime and stuff like that. But we need to deal with the fundamental issues, So that's kind of what these movements are about. Black Lives Matter, addressing the system of policing and the history of it in this country, and how it just wildly disproportionately affects Black communities, and Black police violence. You shouldn't have to fear the police. So when people are crying out about this and trying to fix it, the label Black Lives Matter has been put on it, and that's appropriate. But for someone to come back and say all lives matter, that is indicative of just dismissing everything I just said, and everything we're trying to do to level the playing field in this country. So, it's an instant signal that a person just does not get it, does not empathize at all with Black people and what they're going through.
Yeah. And so what are like the main goals, as far as the Black Lives Matter movement? What is it just the police, or economic, education? I'm sure there's a lot that is considered in that. Health, we see that now with the COVID crisis, how it affects, Black people, it seems like a little bit more than white people. So, we lost your video, Liana.
Sorry. I got a work email, so I had to, move that out.
So what do you think is the first priority? Is it trying to, work on the policing and all that?
Yeah, I think there's two things to make clear. There's the Black Lives Matter hashtag movement, and then there's the organization. Okay. And there are tons of organizations of Black people, of allies, I guess you might call them, of non-Black people working to make Black lives better in this country. And I think that encompasses every aspect, and I think that the important thing about the anti-racist movement is that people address it where they are. So if you work in healthcare, or if you work in education, or if you work, in the legal industry, if you have access to police people, higher ups in your family, stuff like that, it's important to address it where you are in an educated way. So I mean, obviously this movement came about because of police brutality, but there are a lot of things that can kind of conspire to make that happen. You know, if we had if our educational system was more equitable, you know, if funding from the city wasn't just overwhelmingly for police instead of for, you know, programs to kind of help these communities come out of these situations they've been mired in because of systemic racism, then, you know, we wouldn't have to be having some of these conversations. So it's, you know, just start where you are, I think would be my answer.
And so here's another hashtag discussion, that defund the police.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people hear that and think, what do you mean get rid of the police? And so people, you know, are like, what are you trying to do? And so it worries people. So explain what the hashtag defund the police actually means.
Sure. So defund, first of all, defund is a verb, you know, and it could be a matter of degree. It doesn't necessarily mean like completely. There's another hashtag called abolish the police.
Oh, okay.
So that is decidedly like, let's get rid of the police.
Right.
The defund the police is a movement to reallocate police funds or funds from the city that go to police to communities, you know, and I think part of it can be to establish kind of a community policing method or like an alternative to policing that includes sort of like specialized professionals, mental health professionals, domestic abuse professionals, you know, people with graduate degrees that actually intervene, you know, with the help of like a community, you know, representative that's there in case things go south, you know, to kind of attack these issues in a more helpful way instead of just contributing to mass incarceration in this country, which is very loaded and problematic. So I think defund the police, you know, it's to try to, for instance, in Chicago, where I lived for 8 years, I think the number is 1.7 billion they spend a year on policing, and whatever it is, it works out to 5 million a day that go to police. Wow. You know, and because police are disproportionately in these Black and brown neighborhoods, you know, if you take some of that millions of dollars a day and put that toward, you know, education or free lunch, free breakfast, like the Black Panthers were doing for students that are starving before they go to school and can't focus. You know, I mean, there's a ton of things. I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm working toward it, you know, and there's a ton of things you can do with a few $1 million a day that would really turn the trajectory of a community around rather than just sending in people with guns.
And even just activities for the youth, you know, for them, you know, put it back in their parks and things like that, you know. And the community policing, I think in UC, we reach out to the police and we have them come to our UCCA meetings and things like that. So, you know, of course here we're pretty good about that. How do you, like Camden, you know, I think they're the one example of how they totally restructured their police department. I think they got rid of the city police and it became a county of Camden police department. And I was reading about it a little bit. They did, you know, the police are really involved in the community. When there's a new policeman, I guess they go around knocking door to door to introduce themselves to the community, and that the police actually provide, they're the ones that plan these activities for the neighborhood. They'll have movie nights and barbecues and things like that. And I was thinking, you know, I think we could easily do that here, at least in, you know, in our neighborhood. We would probably really enjoy that. But now, you know, in the city of San Diego, they recently approved their budget, and they did not, you know, defund the police. They increased the amount for the police department, you know, and I think there was one holdout. And what do you think about that? How would you like to see, you know, if they're going to increase the budget for the police, how would you like to see those funds reallocated?
So I'm not an expert in these things, but my thinking is, especially after some of the conversation I've had on NextDoor, my thinking is that communities like UC are disproportionately not affected by this kind of thing.
Right.
You know, growing up, I would see there'd be like one police car every few months or so sitting on the corner of like Robbins and Littman, I think it is.
Yeah.
You know, making sure people stop at the stop sign.
Yeah.
There's still to this day, I think there are others that sometimes hang out on Genesee, kind of across from the high school and up the hill a little bit. You know, people aren't speeding.
Yeah.
But very rarely, you know, do you see like a cop car cruising down your street. You know, certainly not, you know, getting out and asking people, what are they doing? Standing on the sidewalk, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, I don't really care whether or not, you know, UC like defunds the police or what, you know, if UC has a good relationship with their police by and large, I mean, that's fine. The only thing I think about is what happened to my brother, you know? So, I mean, and it's a complicated conversation in Minneapolis. You know, they've tried so many reforms. They've put millions into reforming the police there. And you still see, you know, how insidious their police department was.
And I think they're trying to change it now, right? Aren't they trying to like you know,
Yeah, well, they just, I think 9 out of 12 city council members were in favor, and then they just either all unanimously or all but one person voted to replace police with community policing in the city.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think that's not ever going to happen in UC. I don't know that it has to happen in UC.
Right.
You know, and I'm not sure if, you know, things like that can be decided on a community to community basis, but I think they should be, you know, I think it's a conversation that should, if we're going to be increasing funding for the police, we should know that that is going to our community and not just more police flooding southeast neighborhoods.
Yeah, because all communities are different, you know. I mean, you know, even just the type of housing we have mostly single family homes. Just across, you know, the canyon to the north, it's mostly condos and apartments, and so it's a different kind of policing, I think, that you need for, you know, just less than a mile away from us. So, you know,
I mean, that's the thing. It shouldn't be different.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a different kind of policing. It should be this across the board, you know, like I mean, people, you hear about stuff and you have this feeling that it's like more dangerous and therefore they need more police in like poor neighborhoods or, you know, and you need first responders, but you don't need more people patrolling on the streets. Like cops don't, in Chicago, for example, there's a high crime rate, high murder rate. There has been for a long time. It's not like more cops. It's not like cops are diving in front of bullets. It's not like cops are keeping drugs from being peddled and stuff like that. You know, well, first of all, the same amount of drugs are consumed and sold in all neighborhoods or across races anyway. But it's not like the cops there are preventing violence and definitely not helping the cycle of violence. You know, so we need first responders, absolutely, of some sort. But as far as, you know, more cops riding by my house because I live in Southeast as opposed to UC, I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah. And I think that's where I think Camden kind of succeeded in their community policing. I think they actually, you know, they went out and asked the community to help them, you know, and that's probably something similar that they would need in other neighborhoods, you know, have the neighborhood, have the residents be involved in the policing, you know. So
or one of my friends in Chicago said, have the police be residents, you know, if you're too scared to live in that neighborhood or socialize in that neighborhood, free time, then why are you there policing people? You
know, and in fact, when you say that was the one kind of like negative comment I read about some of the residents in Camden. You know, they said it's working, but they said the policemen didn't really know the neighborhood because they didn't live there, you know. So it would be nice to have, you know, policemen live in the neighborhood that they patrol or you know, and so, and so when you
that would cut down on, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that would cut down on the kind of fear factor or the jumpiness that you see happening with cops kind of overreacting I would hope that it would cut down on that.
Yeah, that's true, because then they would say, oh, well, I know this kid. I know they're good. You know, they know me. You know, they would have a rapport or something. I like that idea. You know, and maybe there would be part of the budget would be incentives for the police to be able to live in the neighborhoods that they, you know, work in or something, you know? So,
and then you wouldn't have racist police. Well, I mean, racist is a loaded term, but you wouldn't have police that have issues racially living in those communities. I mean, working in the police force there, because they wouldn't want to live there. So.
Right. So, you know, when you talk about race and the term racist, so there's those other terms too. So I think you said that in your original post, being non-racist versus anti-racism. So what is the difference in terms there when you think about those two terms?
When I think about them, non-racist is someone that only makes an effort to be nice to everybody, does not go out of their way to be racist, does not consciously, you know, discriminate or aren't consciously being prejudicial in their workplace or in their personal life in terms of, you know, what race of people or what race of people they don't associate with. But anti-racist is someone that is educating themselves on systemic racism, so that they're not just relying on their kind of subconscious, like, oh, well, I'm nice, I'm not racist, or I don't see color. So an anti-racist is someone that's educating themselves on systemic racism, institutional racism, the prejudices and hangups they might have, so that they are not only making sure that they are not accidentally discriminating against people, but also
like the history, I guess, the history of racism, you know, the history of it all, and knowing why, you know, why this topic is so important for people, and why, you know, it has to be Black Lives Matter, you know, because it's been going on for, you know, what, 400 years or something. So so I was wondering too, when you guys were growing up, did your parents have to like give you the talk, you know, as far as being careful and things like that, as, you know, when you were pulled over or something?
I mean, I don't remember one specific like sit down, but I don't remember that for anything really. I mean, but I do remember, I remember just always knowing to be good, nice to policemen, you know, do exactly what they say, you know, and I'm sure my brother probably got more of a lesson on that. But yeah, I mean, it's, and that's not just for police, just in society, it's kind of this, they call it respectability politics, where especially older Black people in this country have had it drilled into them that they have to be respectable to like survive, you know, otherwise all bets are off, you know? So, I mean, even to this day, I'll get, when I bring something to my parents, and I mean, they're fabulous people, you know, and that's part of it, you know, it's always a kind of a, well, you know, like come at it at a soft angle, you know, like, you know, so that you aren't victimized over it, whatever it is. It sounds vague, but so when you see like a Black person really, that's why, and you see it like in this pushback from the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, everything people are saying, well, what was his record? Like, well, what was he do? Like, well, what was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He needs a trial. If he was committing a crime, he should get to trial. He shouldn't be summarily executed in the street. That's not okay. Just because it's not respectable enough. Right.
And, you know, and I started to make a list of names, and, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, obviously that have been killed by the police. I mean, you know, just last week, Rayshard Brooks, you know, we had, of course, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Logan, Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, and it goes on and on. And then you also have people that have been killed, not by the police, but just by others that just seems like no big deal. I mean, we had Ahmaud Arbery, you know, we'll see what happens there. It's to be, you know, decided still. You had Trayvon Martin. And I lived through this because I was living in LA at the time. Back before the LA riots, you had, you know, Latasha Harlins, who was killed by a shopkeeper because they thought she was stealing a bottle of orange juice, and she was 15 years old. You had Tamir Rice, who was 12. These people are getting shot. And then, then of course the Rodney King incident. If you haven't seen, I think it's that documentary, it's on Netflix, I think it's called LA 92 or something. People should see that. Rodney King beaten by, 4 LAPD cops. The venue was changed over to Simi Valley, predominantly white neighborhood. They were all found not guilty, and then that started, the LA riots, and which lasted 6 days. I remember watching from my balcony the fires burning in LA.
Wow.
Yeah, it was scary, and it's funny because that was kind of like the decision that we were going to move down to San Diego where we had family, but it happens over and over again. I mean, like I said, the search group has been around over 10 years, and it keeps happening and happening again. We've got those 2, I don't know if you heard about those 2 men that were like hung from trees, like a lynching.
Yeah, actually, there are 2 in California, but 5 nationwide.
Oh, I didn't hear about the ones not in California. But yeah, 1 in Lancaster and 1 in Palmdale. And of course they're first saying that it was suicide. It's like, really? And then, and then I guess in Oakland, knotted ropes that looked like nooses were found hanging around a tree. And so it's still, it's still going on. And what do you feel about, it's like this concept of white supremacy that's kind of invaded, places. And it's not even just the KKK, it's
no, not at all.
It's like,
they were enforcing. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have you thought about how we can work to just get rid of, this subtleness even? Yeah.
So wow, that's a lot. I mean, you should get a degree in this stuff.
I know.
But I mean, where do you start? Okay, so white supremacy. So for instance, there's a streaming channel called Quelly TV, and it's kind of like an alternative to Netflix or Amazon Prime. Yeah, but it's done. It's
what's that? What is
called?
That?
Quelly TV, KWELI TV.com.
Okay.
And it's created by a Black woman, and the intent is to it's for like Black voices, so Black filmmakers that you wouldn't, you see some of them on like Netflix and stuff like that, but this is for like indie films and stuff like that, and documentaries. And so I just watched a documentary on the Wilmington Massacre, which was in 1898. And I don't want to accidentally give a whole history lesson, but basically Black people, it was after the Civil War, and just before Jim Crow and segregation was started. And part of the reason why like Jim Crow and the Black codes and all these insidious little stupid and large laws to keep Black people down came into place. And basically it was a town in the largest town in North Carolina, and a black and white people in the Republican Party, coincidentally, but that's another story, at the time, were living together and thriving together. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure there were issues, but for the most part, they were in the party together and they were working together. And actually, Black people disproportionately or majority ran that town. They were in charge. They were majority in the government. There were wealthy Black families. What I'm trying to say is, at some point, the ex-Confederate soldiers got tired of it. They introduced a smear campaign, this propaganda campaign. You've seen like the blackface and stuff. A lot of those kinds of ads and, rumors and stuff about some white lady getting raped or something. And they managed to pull the white people in that town to the Democratic Party at the time. And they literally instituted a white government and bylaws. That was what was written on the bylaws of the community.
Wow.
So, yeah, and this was, this stuff is very, very deep. and it goes back a long time. But I think what it comes down to is fear, jealousy a long time ago, and fear, and it's perpetuated by fear, and that's kind of what keeps it going, and it keeps us from, in San Diego there was redlining, where Black and Jewish people couldn't buy in places like, I think UC actually, my brother told me UC was founded because Jewish people couldn't live in La Jolla.
Oh, interesting.
Black people were, relegated to Southeast and other races. So, and then now we have like property tax. I mean, someone disputed that as far as California, as far as San Diego Unified specifically. They have these other sorts of funding that are supposed to supplement, but that they got sued by the ACLU in 2019. So I don't know how that's going. But largely in California, still 91% of school funding comes from property tax.
Right.
So combine that with geographic like segregation and disenfranchisement, like stealing funds from or not allowing those areas to flourish, and then funding their schools by property taxes. Still, that's economic discrimination, compounding racial discrimination, and obviously that's going to breed some more of a level of criminal activity if you're marginalizing people. So all this stuff, it's like a fear of, it's exhausting, and
I know. It's like, where do you start?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Why do we have to start now? It shouldn't be. I feel like why can't people just learn to grow up and just be good people? I mean, I don't know why it's. Well,
that's the thing. It's deep. So like, someone can be another. I had a ton of friends. I was friends with everybody when I was a kid here, and everyone has good and bad in them. But this race thing, this fear of Black people, fear of the other, it's very deep, and you really have to dig deep and catch yourself and allow other people to catch you, which is difficult. We all get defensive when we're corrected. But it's something that's kind of deep into our Americanness, even Americans in general, are blind to the fact that, I mean, it's another story of what, the imperialism and bad things our government is doing around the world, and we have a sort of entitlement that comes with that. So it's the same thing with our society and white supremacy.
Yeah. I still like, I still can't understand how people are so, that try to hold on so much to like the symbol of the Confederate flag. It's like beyond me that, I don't get that. And I'm glad, I think it was NASCAR that recently banned it, and so that's really good. And so hopefully we'll all get there, and I'm glad that there's a movement. I'm glad that there's, you started the NextDoor group. I know that there was an impromptu kind of like parade down Governor Drive by a group of.
Yes, I stopped by that. Yeah. The organizer's name was Brooke.
Brooke Scott or Brooke something.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that there's, I think I have that down. So I haven't gone myself. I haven't had a chance to. Is the protests at Genesee and Nobel, are those still going on?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Someone just asked me that yesterday. And
but
Sean was doing it every day for a while, but I was outside last night and I didn't hear any honks or anything like that. So.
Okay, all right. So, but if they are still going on, they were at Genesee and Nobel, I think, daily, like 2 to 7 or something like that. So they were going on for a long time. And of course, it doesn't have to be an organized thing. Anybody in the neighborhood can, walk down the street and carry a sign with whatever they say,
Absolutely.
So, that's good. And so that's the thing. It's like, so we're here in our, it's not, false to say that UC is predominantly white. So with this new group, UC Residents Against Racism, ! And so people who are kind of like, well, this is all wrong and I really want to help, but I don't know what to do. What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, you should, one of my best friend on the East Coast is kind of in that space. And she just finished reading White Fragility.
Yeah.
And I haven't read it, but supposedly it breaks down a lot of the stuff we just talked about and kind of gives you a framework to start to understand, what's going on. And there are other books you can read. Two of my best friends from UC actually are reading How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Okay.
By Ibram Kennedy, and that kind of delineates like the anti-racist movement and defines. He starts with some very clear definitions. So that's a good book to read. They could hit up Surge or find Surge on Facebook or online. They have some webinars going around right now.
Okay, yeah.
Going on daily, so that's really good. And I mean, protesting is good and stuff, but for like working professionals, family people that are preoccupied with their kids and stuff, I think the far and away the most important thing is for them to, number one, get educated reading those books, but also take that education to their workplace. Take it to your PTA meetings, or I think site governance meetings at schools where they're deciding where this LCAP funding, additional supplementary funding goes, and make sure it gets to the students that need it the most,
And,
so I think that's very important.
And teach your kids.
What'd you say?
And teach your kids.
Yes, and teach your kids better than you were taught.
Right.
Watch, look at documentaries, have your kids, read supplementary materials and get them around some Black people. Find a way to get them exposed to other cultures, so that when they're grown up and they graduate and they see some, they aren't scared, Yeah.
I will say, my kids ended up actually going to high-tech middle schools.
Oh, okay.
And the one thing I did like about how they had, how they selected the kids for that school was they did it by zip code. And they only took so many people from each zip code. So it was a true reflection of the city and the county. And and I will say that's how my kids got more exposed, to Black people, was by going to that school. We eventually came back because of sports, but but they had that nice exposure, to the different groups that they normally wouldn't have gotten here. So I did like that concept too.
Yeah.
And I will say in your original post, which was on June 1st in NextDoor, so they could try to search, I think they could search you, Liana Alston, LianaAlston. So there, in your first post, you do have links to some good resources too.
Yes.
Some books and an anti-racist resource page that had podcast listings and books also, and other websites and
children's books.
Children's books too. So that was a good one too. And I think you do have a list of books I think that you put in there with your book club that you used.
Yeah.
And info about Surge too. So if you can try to find Liana's original NextDoor post, which is great. I'm so glad you started that. And you did come to the UCCA meeting and gave a short little comment there, which is great. And I think that's where a lot of us is like, oh, let's join this group, And then is there a Facebook page too? And I know.
Yeah, no, not yet. There's just the NextDoor group, and I'm gonna try to get someone from Surge to kind of start leading it, and then we'll see where that goes. I don't know if it will get absorbed in Surge or what we'll do, but
because you are going to law school soon.
So, yeah.
You'll be
in DC. In DC. So I won't be nearby either.
Yeah. And I'm sure your parents are probably really proud of you and your brother, and glad all the work that you're doing, trying to educate everybody in the neighborhood here. I think that's great.
Yeah. I mean, we're proud of them. They worked super hard and persevered through terrible things to,
Yeah. And what
position,
your parents went to UCSD, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how were they good examples for you?
I mean, in so many ways. My mom is actually from Trinidad. She's an immigrant.
Okay.
And then my dad is from Baltimore, which is where geographic residential segregation started in the U.S. So, and then he went to Carnegie Mellon. He could have gone to Princeton, but he went where there was a scholarship, so that his four brothers and sisters after him could go to school as well. And my dad was a triple major in engineering, business, and something else at Carnegie Mellon. Met my mom in Trinidad, grad school at Berkeley and San Diego. My mom got a graduate biology degree with honors from San Diego while raising my brother and I.
Wow.
We grew up in Mesa housing, which is like Regents Road and La Jolla Village Drive.
Yeah.
And it was a very international community. It was graduate students with families housing. So I'm still in touch with a lot of the kids there. You know, one is in Mexico, between Mexico and Hollywood, and she's an actress. Another one is an actress, Black sisters, an actress in LA. One is a lawyer in New York, you know, and just a very diverse, beautiful, like, upbringing there. And my dad, I mean, a lot of people might know my dad, Michael Alston. He's just a sweet, caring person. He's constantly working on diversity projects for Qualcomm. He's on different boards around the city. And he doesn't have much free time from work because they work with India on their chips and stuff. But he uses all of his free time to help better the community and also specifically the lives of young Black people in this country. So yeah, incredible examples. My mom is super well read. She had me reading from a young age. So yeah.
That's good. Education is good. Everyone needs to know the history. So do you have any parting thoughts for us before we say goodbye today?
No, I encourage, yes, I encourage, you know, I love UC. I grew up here, you know, I played Bobby Sox, Stanley Park sports, had so many friends and wonderful people here. And I just encourage people to keep an open mind, you know. The last thing, I know it's like a heated conversation, but the last thing we want to do is turn people away. Right. That could help us. Making this community a better place, a more equitable place, you know. So just love, put that first in your communications, and keep an open mind and get educated.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you again, and for joining me today.
Thank you.
And thanks for starting the Residents Against Racism NextDoor group. And we wish you well in law school. And once again, this podcast is brought to you by the University City Community Association and made possible through a grant from the County of San Diego. For more information about UCCA, including membership, go to our website at universitycitynews.org. And remember to follow UCCA on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thanks again, and have a great day. And remember, University City, more than just a neighborhood.